Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. On April 30th, Patrick Brown tweeted out, quote, "Our noise bylaw, originally passed in 1984, only included an exemption for church bells. It will now include all faiths within the permitted hours and decibel levels. The Muslim community can proceed with the sunset azan because it's 2020 and we treat all faiths equally. Hashtag Ramadan," and the little crescent thing. And Remax replied. Now there's a whole big controversy around this, and I'll show you the controversy, and then I'll get back to Remax. Okay, so here is a woman, and I'm not going to Amirella. Sorry if I've got that wrong. Amira tweeted at Gordy Kuman GTA. "Owner of Remax Gold Realty will not stand for hate against anyone. This comment of Ravi Huda is harsh, hateful, and disrespectful, and a disgrace. He needs to apologize and be dealt with in an uncompromising manner." So here is Ravi Huda responding to Patrick Brown. It says, replying to Patrick Brown, "What's next? Separate lanes for camel and goat riders, allowing slaughter of animals at homes in names of sacrifice, bylaw requiring all women to cover themselves from head to toe in tents to appease the peace fools for votes." And so he got backlash on that, and so that's the original tweet. And here's the owner of the Remax Gold replying or posting something on Facebook. He says, "To the Peel County East Asian community, as many of you are aware, Ms. Ravi Huda, one of our Remax Gold Realty Limited agents, recently sent out a series of tweets through his own personal account that are deeply offensive, disturbing, and in clear breach of our company values. We employ a mosaic of agents of all faiths, races, and religions to serve our multi-ethnic and multicultural clients whose trust we value. On behalf of all of us at Team Remax Gold, I want to extend our sincerest apologies for the actions and words shared by Mr. Huda. His views and comments in no way reflect those of this brokerage or its hundreds of agents. Mr. Huda's continued employment at Remax Gold would run contrary to our values of inclusiveness and respect for the Muslim community, and we have terminated his employment. All of our agents work hard to make a difference in the communities that we serve, and to respect all people. During these challenging times, it is important now more than ever that we continue to support one another and come together as a united community. We wish you well and hope that you and your loved ones are healthy and safe." Okay, so that's Gordy. And here's Remax Canada. So this is like a blue check mark Remax Canada, right? Remax Canada. See? And they tweeted out, "We do not share or support the views of Mr. Huda. We can confirm he's been terminated and is no longer affiliated with Remax. Multiculturalism and diversity are some of the best qualities in our communities, and we're committed to upholding these values in all we do." Okay, so maybe it was an ill-conceived tweet, but usually aren't these things kind of private between like a boss and an employee, rather than like dragging it all across multi-levels of social media? Don't you think this is really kind of strange to show fealty like this? Like, it's out of the norm, right? Like, usually if didn't TSN fire somebody for getting on camera and saying like something inappropriate, right? And like, it's not funny, and then a bunch of people started doing it to news anchors and stuff, right? And this TSN guy, I think it was TSN, something like that, he got fired for that. So like your actions in real life, but when he got fired, didn't they say we've dealt with the situation? And obviously he wasn't on the air, so people could draw conclusions. But this is a little different, right? Like this is like publicly reaming this guy out, and it's not like this guy didn't apologize. Here's the CBC News. I'll show you the whole. I'll read the whole article. At the end, it talks about, well, not the whole article, some highlighted parts. But at the end, it talks about how the guy tried to apologize. Mr. Huda tried to apologize, and not a chance. So not only was he fired, he also lost a position on the school board. The tweet sparked an investigation. Last updated 23 minutes ago. Again, this is the 6th of May. CBC's reporting, disturbing Islamophobic tweet about call to prayer in Brampton prompts investigation by Peel Schoolyard. A disturbing Islamophobic tweet on the city of Brampton's decision to allow mosques to broadcast the call to prayer has prompted the Peel District School Board to remove one of its school council chairs and launch an investigation into comments it says are, quote, never acceptable. Last week, several Toronto area municipalities granted local mosques permission to broadcast the azar, or call to prayer, over speakers at sunset every day during Ramadan, the Muslim holy month. The move was a welcome one to many in light of a pandemic that's made gathering for prayer impossible and left places of worship empty. This is the weirdest paragraph in the whole article. Okay, it acknowledges that it's a call to prayer, being like, come and pray, call to prayer, come and pray, right, over loudspeakers during a pandemic that has prevented anybody from getting together to gather for prayer. Are church bells still ringing in Brampton? Are church bells still ringing in Guelph? I'm not downtown off. I used to live downtown, and I like to hear the church bells. The Church of Our Lady and the Basilica of Our Lady I lived right behind it, and they would do the bells every day. And you get used to it, right? Like it just kind of disappears into the background. Is that still happening? I don't know if it's still happening. But interesting stuff that they're saying this pandemic is to blame for the approval of the call to prayer. It's counter to what we should be doing, right? Right? Isn't it weird? Okay, maybe I'm misinterpreting. Stay in your homes, self-isolate, don't go out unless you have to. Call to prayer. Right? Okay, back to this. Quote, our noise bylaws originally passed in 1984 and only included an exemption for church bells, Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown said in a tweet, and then blah, 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 blah. The rest of the tweet that I said. And then Mr. Huda's tweet is said again, so I'm just not going to read it. I'm just going to carry on. The user's Twitter account has since been made private. Here's the Patrick Brown tweet, and here's Mr. Huda's tweet again. On his Twitter profile, Huda identifies himself as a professional realtor, immigration consultant, and community volunteer. According to the Peel District School Board, he was also an executive school council member for the Macville Public School in the city of Bolton. School councils are comprised of parents, staff, and community representatives and advise principals on a range of topics, including code of behavior, budget priorities, and curriculum delivery. That changed Tuesday morning when the board tweeted that Huda was being removed from his role as a school council chair and will no longer be allowed to participate on council in any other capacity. And, okay, so I scroll down. So he's lost his job. He's lost his school council position. Back to this. On Tuesday evening, Remax confirmed Huda was no longer employed with the company, right? Very publicly. We've dealt with the situation internally and it's a private matter. Thank you very much. But we disagree with him and he's a bad person and we don't tolerate anything. Maybe they didn't say he's a bad person. He said, but we don't tolerate all of that here. Out with you, Mr. Huda. That's what they said. Back to this. Quote, we do not share or support the views of Mr. Huda. We can confirm that he has been terminated and is no longer affiliated with Remax, the company tweeted. So, yeah, I mean, that's the quote. Back to this. In a statement to CBC News, Huda said his comment was, quote, not directed towards any community or entity, but just my attempt to state that we shouldn't be going back to the times where such means of communication was necessary. Unfortunately, my tweet was misinterpreted, he said. Huda said he removed his tweet and immediately put out another one apologizing unconditionally, but that the action hasn't made much difference. He said the school board unilaterally decided his tweet was directed at a specific community and that didn't give him an opportunity to explain himself before removing him from his post. I'm in the process of legally addressing that. And here's his apology tweet. So I'll read his tweet one more time just to give context because I don't want you to think that I'm not giving equal time to it. So here it is one last time. He said, what's next? Separate lanes for camel and goat riders, allowing slaughter of animals at homes in names of sacrifice, bylaw requiring all women to cover themselves from head to toe in tents to appease the peace of fools for votes. I think the peace of fools may have been a mistype. And here's his apology. It says, some of my previous tweets have been misinterpreted and have caused hurt to members of our community. I apologize to those who may have been hurt and assure that I will take due care in expressing my views to incorporate better understanding. And then we are one family. And here's a CP24 article talking about exactly the same thing. This was posted today. Group warns Mississauga Council not to, quote, give in to hate amid push to reverse decision allowing mosques to broadcast call to prayer. An anti-hate group is calling on Mississauga City Council to defeat a motion that would reverse their earlier decision to allow mosques to broadcast the evening call to prayer during Ramadan, arguing that in doing so, they would be, quote, giving in to hate. During a meeting on April 29th, Mississauga City Council voted to temporarily suspend the enforcement of noise bylaws to allow mosques to broadcast the evening call to prayer during a time in which religious in-person services have been halted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Same problem as the last article. Doesn't make any sense. Like, call to prayer. Like, come and pray. Why? No. Okay. I understand it's a holy month, and if you want to explain it like, it's a holy month and it's tradition in the holy month and blah, 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 and maybe explain it that way. But saying like, You know that pandemic that's locking everybody in their homes? Well, let's call everybody to pray every day at sundown. Like, it just seems just weird to say, yes, this is a good idea. Same as giving free public transit. Isn't public transit one of the worst ways to spread COVID-19? Because you're touching things that a lot of other people are touching, blah, 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 blah. So, like, it's just a weird, it seems like a counterintuitive response to a pandemic. Now, I understand that a lot of workers are potentially low-income workers, etc., and making public transport free to continue to let people get to work. It makes sense in that kind of roundabout way, but from a perspective of spreading the disease, why not give everybody taxi fare incentives? Why not use the transit money to fund taxi cabs for healthcare workers and essential workers? Anyway, I'm just thinking out loud here, but it just seems weird, right? Anyway, back to this. So today's meeting of council, which will be conducted electronically, today's May 6th, like today. Ward 10 Councillor Sue McFadden will move a motion asking the decision to be reversed and that the matter be sent to Council's Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee to allow for thoughtful discourse and public engagement. I just want to point out, government moves slow. If you wanted to have the call to prayer happening during Ramadan, you would have had to tell people in like January to start things going. You would have had to say, hey, we're doing this Ramadan thing and we'd love to do the call to prayer in all the mosques. Is that okay in Mississauga? And you could start that. If you wanted to do that thing, you could do that, right? Go ahead. If you want to do that, do that. But it doesn't happen like the day before Ramadan, right? Like, it doesn't happen the day of Ramadan. Usually there's public consultation. Usually there's an outlet for people like Mr. Huda, who has lost everything, to express himself in a reasonable way, right? To contact the people who are in charge instead of sending out this ridiculous tweet, right? Instead of doing that, he could have maybe gone through the correct channels, but there were no correct channels for him to push back on, right? This has been a PR push the whole time. And it just seems really, really strange that it's just fine. And it's just fine that there's been no check and balance. It's not been in the works for months. It's not like we were working on this and then the conversation got derailed by COVID-19. It's because COVID-19 we're sending the call to prayer, which is weird. And because COVID-19, you have to be tolerant of that. Weird, right? Back to this. I'm going to scroll down because these anti-hate groups are funded in a shady way and I don't trust them, and I think that they're BS. Funded with taxpayer money probably, and I think that their perspective on things is dishonest. I think they're dishonest people. Back to this. McFadden's motion argues that the initial decision was done without public consultation and was improperly brought to the floor of council without warning, meaning that staff were unable to provide advice in order to make a thoughtful and informed decision. Since the vote, she said that members of council have also heard thousands of members of the public about the decision, demonstrating a keen interest in matters of faith in the public realm. I wonder if most of the comments are like this, or if they're supportive. I wonder, because they could have a lot of support. Who knows? But it's interesting. And our democracy is meant to give people the opportunity and the ability to talk to their elected officials and to say, I don't want this, or I do want this, right? And that ability was usurped here. And regardless of whether you agree with it or disagree with it, I disagree with the process. I disagree with the inability to push back on it. And yeah, I don't think that Mr. Huda did a good job in articulating his displeasure with this, but I also don't think Remax did a good job at handling this whole situation either. So, crazy world we live in, right? Be careful what you tweet, because, everybody will come after you with pitchforks and flaming figurative torches, right? And be careful what you do in Canada. Don't dress up like a stormtrooper and have a toy gun because the cops are going to get you. This is crazy. I'm just going to get it to a meaningful part of the clip. If you haven't seen this, this is stupid. I can't believe this happened in our country. I feel terrible for Lethbridge. I feel terrible for the cops who had to play along as if this was some dangerous thing. It's incredibly, incredibly scary. Hold on. Yeah, so the first 19 seconds is pretty worthwhile watching. So we're gonna watch this. This is a young girl in a stormtrooper costume.
Stop being a ghost. Stop, stop.
And the whole reason for that is that she was in a stormtrooper costume with a pretend plastic gun, right? Like it's incredible what has happened to law enforcement, right? Like that's more important than some of. It's just very, very strange what's happening. Goodness me. Here is a quick. This is a headline one. This is in mystery investigation of 2 Canadian scientists' request for Ebola hennepavirus from the Wuhan lab. The other day I reported a dossier was found and it tied an Australian lab to the Chinese Wuhan virology lab. And here's even more questions about how Canadian labs were tied to the same Wuhan virology lab. It's really, it's interesting to pay attention to with regards to what's happening in the world and what is being focused on in Canada, right? We're missing the really big stories, I think. Here's an important story. No timeline for federal budget amid coronavirus uncertainty. No timeline for the federal budget? Isn't that important? Aren't we $250 billion in debt now? Yeah, we are. Yep. Here it is. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says there's no timeline for when his government will table a federal budget because of the extraordinary uncertainty posed by the coronavirus pandemic. Since then, Trudeau has rolled out hundreds of billions of dollars in emergency spending and tax deferrals to support workers laid off or facing restricted hours because of the economic shutdown. During his daily briefing with journalists on Monday, Trudeau was asked when Canadians will see a full budget outlining the government's spending priorities for the year and said it's hard to tell. Quote, a budget in normal times is a forecast of the measures that will be presented in the years to come. Right now, we are in a period of uncertainty, extraordinary uncertainty, as to what might happen next month or 3 months, Trudeau said, adding that talks on how to provide some kind of update are ongoing. Now, I think it's important because usually the budget is, it's a confidence vote, and this is a minority government. So if the government comes out with something that doesn't look very good, well, it could fall and we could be in an election. So I mean, that's important. Who knows when the budget is going to come out, and who knows when spending like this is going to stop. Yesterday, and this is a tweet that was out yesterday, it says Prime Minister offering $252 million in new COVID aid for farmers and food processors. And here's Jamie Mask making a good point. He says $252 million to the agriculture industry because they can't get enough workers to plant, harvest, and process food for market. Meanwhile, a few days ago, $9 billion to students to stay home and not work. Here's that, right? Here, House of Commons, this is Globe Mail. House of Commons approves $9 billion student aid package after Liberals agree to opposition changes. Wouldn't it have made sense to send the students up to the farms and say, hey, we'll supplement the farm work, right? Like, and it's stuff like this, right? When you unilaterally just make decisions and when it seems like you're on a crazy carpet going down a very slippery hill of spending and of responding every single day, and the response seems to be not well coordinated, not well thought out, and this is just one example of many, then people start to lose confidence. And confidence is how the government maintains its effectiveness, its ability to govern, right? If people don't have confidence, then, well, you can't govern, right? Here's Jagmeet Singh, and he says, today we are calling for immediate help for all Canadians. Immediate direct help, sending $2,000 with an additional $250 per child directly to all Canadians. Universal basic income. Firing freeze, giving employers more than 75% in a wage subsidy to keep people employed. And see more information here. So it's a New Democrat ad, but Jagmeet Singh's calling for universal basic income, right? Is that really where we want to go? I know I'm long today, but I've got 2 stories to finish off with. I'll finish off with the gun ban. First, I just want to touch on the Wet'suwet'en. Wet'suwet'en Agreement outlines steps for transferring control of territory to traditional leadership. This doesn't take into account the agreements signed by the elected tribe people, the elected leaders of the tribes, excuse me. This doesn't take into account the agreements signed by the gas company for the pipeline. This doesn't resolve the pipeline issue at all. This just restores the hereditary chiefs to a leadership position with the government. The government is negotiating with it's the wrong people, and it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't solve the pipeline problem. It's such a weird, again, it's like if you have a cup full of milk and spilled on the table and you start cleaning up the floor first, right? Like, oh, let's just clean up the floor. Like, forget the cup. Like, it's just going to keep dripping milk everywhere, right? Like, I have a 4-year-old. These things happen daily, right? Here it is from the what is it? CBC News says the draft Memo of Understanding, MOU, doesn't resolve the ongoing opposition to the construction of the natural gas pipeline through unceded Wet'suwet'en land. Most hereditary chiefs still reject the project, but the agreement aims to clarify one of the main issues raised by the conflict: who speaks for the Wet'suwet'en people going forward, right? And I've talked about this as well. Other elected chiefs and other sub-chiefs were saying that, like, they haven't been able to do their usual gathering to talk about the agreement. So they're saying that how they make agreements is under threat, I believe it was the quote used. So how does that help? How does this help anything? It just well, you're just cleaning up the ground milk. The last story for this morning, Globe and Mail is reporting Canada's gun ban is not what the government says it is. This is an opinion piece, but I've been talking about the gun ban, and this is a good little piece, so worth the few minutes it'll take me to get through it. Okay, Canada's new gun ban is not a ban. It might sound like a ban to urbanites who are unfamiliar with Canada's labyrinth of federal gun regulations, and indeed the government is quite deliberate in repeatedly using that word to describe its recent actions: ban. But the change announced last week does not in any meaningful way represent a major shift in the overall way Canada treats the purchase, storage, and use of firearms. So if you've been cheering Ottawa's new gun prohibition as the end of legal sale of military-conceived deadly weapons, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you've been had. Meticulously misleading government messaging will do that. Semi-automatic weapons are still legal. Let me say that again. Semi-automatic weapons are still legal. Firearms in Canada are either prohibited, banned, restricted, legal under certain conditions, or non-restricted. Fully automatic weapons have been illegal since 1978. Not much has changed there. What changed last week was that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that the list of prohibited weapons in Canada would be expanded to include a number of previously restricted and non-restricted firearms. He calls this a ban on military-style assault rifles, but that's a designation that has no meaning in Canadian law under the Firearms Act. It is rather a made-up, undefined category useful only in perpetrating the mistaken impression that Canada has banned a whole classification of firearms when it has not. I scroll down. Indeed, the government trusts that those to whom this gesture is supposed to appeal won't really know the difference. That's why Mr. Trudeau could say last Friday that you don't need an AR-15 to bring down a deer, even though hunters in Canada already weren't allowed to use an AR-15 or other restricted firearms to do so. It's also why he could talk about banning guns designed to kill the largest number of people in the shortest amount of time, in reference to semi-automatic weapons, although he was actually describing fully automatic weapons, which were banned decades ago. I point all of this out not as someone who has any interest in guns or particularly understands their appeal, but as someone who doesn't like government seizing upon knowledge gaps in the population to earn political clout. And there's a couple of examples of this in today's show, isn't there? Right? Like, here's another example, right? So isn't it interesting that they use the same trick over and over? Notable, maybe not interesting, notable. Back to this. If this government was to expend some political capital on guns, it should do it on measures that will actually make a difference and not marginal gestures it can spaciously sell as a ban. And I generally agree. They're not cracking down on borders. They're not cracking down on things that would actually make a difference to the gun crime in Toronto and things that would make a difference to the drugs and all of the other issues that we're seeing, or a lot of the other issues we're seeing. They're using this as a political tool to appear as if they're doing something when in fact they aren't. It's not going to move the needle a little bit. It's going to make guns a little bit more expensive on the black market probably. So interesting to watch. Thanks for watching me. Check out canadapoly.com. Check out canadareport.co. Check out speakingmoistly.co. There was a new episode posted yesterday. Greg and I talked about a lot of, gun bans and other fun, interesting topics. Have a wonderful